Hi, this is Paige. I am coming on here to make a part two conclusion update, whatever you want to call it, to my episode on the podcast We're All Insane, titled Trapped in Rehab, the Florida Shuffle. I was told by a lot of people that in the comments, a lot of people were asking about a part two, an update, a conclusion, what had happened, and why there was such an abrupt ending. So I want to just make a quick video on the fly, just explaining all of that and giving a general conclusion for anybody that was curious about that. That way I could explain what had happened with that, what happened after we had left Florida, and additionally the message I was trying to convey in hopes of what people would get out of hearing my experiences. So for starters, for some context, I do want to say I am filming this on my phone, so if you're wondering why the quality isn't super wonderful, I'm not a videographer. I don't really have any experience doing anything like this, so I am working with what I got, so please bear with me that the quality on this is not super ideal. Additionally, there was a conclusion filmed in the episode. We had filmed for about 6 hours in November. I did have a wrap up with the host. We spoke about the events that followed and my final thoughts and conclusion and what I'm hoping people would get out of it, all the things that I'm going to include here. However, in between the filming and the editing portion, unfortunately that footage was lost and not salvageable. I believe Devorah tried to contact a tech company to see if they could help salvage it, but they were also not able to do anything to help. So unfortunately, we had to work with what we got, and the abrupt ending just ended up being the best option in that particular instance. So my apologies for anybody who was very confused and frustrated with that, but hopefully this finds anybody that wanted to hear the part two or wanted to understand the general message that I wanted to share with everybody, and hopefully this is satisfactory to anybody that was wanting that. I'm just going to jump in with where we left off in the podcast episode. Where I remember we left off was the outpatient slash IOP halfway house living situation that Jay and I were in had gotten shut down. The Sheriff's Department and the Department for Children's and Families had shown up and told everybody that they had to leave by 5 p.m. I had called my parents as a result of that, because I had told my parents in advance the week before when we had found out about the arrest that that kind of thing might be occurring. So I had called my parents and I let them know that it's time, and we ultimately decided that we wanted to go home. So with that being said, we ended up going to a hotel nearby while my parents had gotten themselves prepared to come down to Florida. At this time, I can't remember if I included this in the episode or not, but at this time, Jay had a car. He had recently purchased a car a few months prior, and we had intended that we are all going to take our belongings and drive up to Ohio from Florida. So the day of the shutdown, we took all of our stuff from our living space, put it in a storage unit, and checked ourselves into a hotel. That same day, my parents had called off work for the next few days and basically got themselves prepared for the drive to come down so that we could put stuff in their car, we could put stuff in Jay's car, and we could take both cars and go back up to Ohio from there. Once my parents came down after a couple of days, my parents had come down, they met with us, we put all of our belongings in both cars and began our journey back to Ohio. In that time, I hadn't driven for a very long time, so there were a few points during that commute that I actually did drive, but it had been the first time I'd driven in a couple of years, which was pretty nuts. So that was a very interesting road trip for myself, particularly. I'm sure everybody else found it as a very interesting road trip. When we got back to Ohio, our general plan was to live together. We had thought about getting an apartment together, but Jay did not want to do that. So what we ended up doing instead was we ended up staying with his mom, who had been living in a duplex. She may or may not still live in one, I'm not positive, but She was living in a duplex in which the additional part of the house had not been lived in for many years and had not been worked on or really touched in a number of years. So our idea was to basically renovate that half of the duplex and live there. That way we would have some more secure living, and I also desperately wanted to live with him, and that was mostly what he wanted. If it was up to me, we would have gotten an apartment, but unfortunately, I really just wanted to do the things that would please him, so I agreed that we could just live with his mom at the time. The living situation with Jay's mom was not really ideal, but it was a place to live, and I had a lot of hope in that time, especially a lot of hope in the relationship and where that would go, especially because we were renovating a place together, and I thought maybe that would make the relationship stronger and we would be able to see it through. Unfortunately, that didn't last super long. It was a very unhealthy relationship from the jump, and I actively kind of ignored and excused a lot of red flags for the sake of hope and the fact that I really loved that individual. But often when the red flags would start to disappear, they would reappear pretty quickly again. In particular, the time that I spent living with him and his mom was about a year. In that year, I finally got to meet my youngest niece, who at the time was probably just a few months old, as she was born in 2020, and this was in the summer of 2020. So I had met her finally, which was very wonderful. Additionally, I had gotten myself a job, I had gotten a car, and I was also actively in contact with the FBI. So that's one part that was not included in the original podcast episode, although the communications with the FBI began in that time frame where I was staying at the last treatment center that had gotten shut down by the state. The communication started off pretty small. My mom in particular was in contact with somebody from the Sober Home Task Force. I think that's what it's called. I'm not exactly positive, but she was in communication with somebody from there, who then got her in communication with somebody from the FBI, as they were actively investigating maps and the things that had occurred there, more specifically the insurance fraud and the general medical fraud that was going on with that treatment center. When I initially went and met with the FBI, when I initially spoke to them, I was still at the other place, I was still at Academy, and I was very hesitant. I didn't really want to put myself in hot water, and I also didn't really know if it was something that I would be okay doing, not necessarily with my comfortability, but also if I was justified to do so. To me, I thought, well, I had went to this place, I went to MAPS multiple times, and I had gotten medication, knowingly that they would give me a bunch of medication, and I did this and I did that, and I kind of took all of that and took that as reasoning for me not to have any part in the case. But upon speaking with a agent about the case as a whole and what they were investigating, it was kind of affirmed to me that despite all of that and despite my involvement in things, it shouldn't have happened and it shouldn't have been possible. When I had told them, well, I did go back 3 times, and despite the fact that my situation with them wasn't good, I did tell them I wanted more medication, and I did take a lot of meds knowing that it wasn't in my best interest. And what was told to me and kind of opened my eyes about the situation as a whole was that they should have and would have known that they had a reputation for that, because everybody knew that they had a reputation for that. They wouldn't have not known that if everybody else knew that. Additionally, when doing something like a urinalysis, they can check levels for all the drugs and substances that you're taking. So for me to say that I was drinking more than I was, and them to take my urine and test it, they would have seen that that wasn't true, but decided to medicate me anyway, in which it shouldn't have been an option to get medicated that much regardless. So once I had that in mind and I realized, oh, yeah, I shouldn't have had this option, whether or not I utilize that option anyway, I guess you're right. That was not okay. And that was a system that they were taking advantage of the possibility of people enjoying using that system. Then I kind of realized that I wasn't really somebody that was in the wrong for utilizing what was being offered to me so willingly. So initially, my communications with the FBI, the investigators, and the people on the prosecution team were very far and few between. But as time went on, and as I was up in Ohio in 2020, those communications became more frequent and became a lot more important as they were building up a case and speaking to a lot of individuals about their experiences about the case. Eventually, an affidavit came out for the case in general. Many people were arrested, including the owners, the doctor, a few body brokers that were involved, and a few other people. For me particularly, I was being asked to be involved with the case against the owners of the treatment center. So as some time went on and I was speaking with them, the 60-some page affidavit came out and arrests were made. And later I was subpoenaed to go speak in federal court against the two owners that were running the treatment center at the time. With all that being said, I am going to come back to that portion of the story very momentarily and just cover some of the things that occurred in that same time period of those communications and how that played into effect later. So during that same time period also, I was staying with Jay and his mom. We were renovating the duplex, spending a lot of time and money and effort, energy into doing that because a lot of work needed done. There were a few things that also occurred that were pretty relevant to my life today, such as I got into the hobby of pole fitness. So I found a local studio that does pole fitness classes, and I started going to a studio that was kind of close to where I was living at the time, and I got really into that and I started to get pretty decent at it, which was really nice. It became a really good outlet for myself, my physical and especially my mental health. So that was really, really important to me and a very pivotal point in like healing for myself. Aside from the general healing aspect of it though, the pole fitness ended up becoming really handy when Jay and I broke up and I needed to move out on my own and I needed money on top of the full-time job I had. I needed more money right now, immediately, so I could move out of the space as he was already seeing somebody else. So I just got a job at a local club. It wasn't really ideal per se, and it wasn't my first choice, but I realized pretty quickly that that would be easy, quick money, and I already had the pole skills to do it. So I started working at the club for a little bit and had gotten enough money that I could get my own place. When I moved into my own apartment, a couple things happened in that same month that were pretty big. So the subpoena that I referred to just recently ended up coming to fruition in that time. I got the date for the subpoena of when I would be called to speak in court. At that point, I was pretty prepared because for anybody who hasn't been in court before, usually if you're doing an ongoing case and you're working with a prosecuting team, they do spend some time preparing that you are able to properly answer questions, and you, for obvious reasons, have to be as honest as you can for whatever you do remember about the case. So I did spend some time preparing for the questions that might be asked and preparing my honest answers for them so that I wouldn't have too much of a stressful time in the space that I would be in court. I ended up going to the court hearing probably a week or two after I moved into my first apartment by myself. That was a very weird and surreal moment. I don't want to get into the full details about the court proceedings solely because of privacy reasons, and it's all done and said already. What I will say is that the prosecuting team and the defense team did a really good job at doing their jobs, and they worked really hard. They were working on the case for a long time, and the court case in itself lasted for a series of months. With there being so many people involved in it, and the fact that people were getting flown from various states, I wasn't the only one. I was one of many people that were flown from across the country to come and speak in court. It was a federal case because of that, and because of the extent of where the insurance fraud went. At the end of the day, though, the court case finally ended, I believe, like at the very end of the year. So it went on for at least 2 or 3 months. And I only came for one portion, where I came in, flew down, the Department of Justice flew me down the prior day. I went and spoke in court the next morning, and then the following day I got flown back up to Ohio. About a week later, after I went for court, the following weekend, so yeah, probably about a week later, I went out of state with my mom. She offered to drive, which was really generous of her, and we went to Paul's celebration of life. So as I mentioned previously in the first part of the podcast, on the We're All Insane podcast portion, my friend Paul had passed away during the pandemic. So because he had passed during the pandemic, there was no funeral. There was no option to do that kind of thing. So about a year after his passing, when they were able to, his family decided to do a celebration of life, which I think that's something he would have really been happy with, and I think he would have really enjoyed seeing everybody getting together for that. To keep this part pretty brief, and also for the sake of people's privacy, so after Paul's celebration of life, Jay and I ended up getting back together for a short period. The person he was seeing, they had broken up. We started dating for a short period. For obvious reasons, that didn't last very long, and ultimately I decided to completely go no contact by the end of the day. Same old, and it didn't work out, is the nicest way I can put that. Sometime in the midst of all this as well, I ended up leaving the job I had with the harm reduction work I was doing. So I ended up leaving and working full-time at the club for some time, which worked for a little bit, but was pretty inconsistent as far as money goes. And for a number of reasons, working at the club is not super ideal. Sometime after us going no contact, I met my now fiance. If anybody didn't notice, I was wearing my engagement ring in the video as well. I had gotten engaged, I don't even know how many months ago it was. Last summer. So a few months ago, I had gotten engaged. When I met Tristan, I liked him a lot, and I thought he was great, and I was just kind of like playing the field. But when we both kind of came to this realization that, hey, we like each other a lot, what's stopping us from dating besides other people telling us we should wait? Then we kind of just decided that that was in our best interest, that we should just date. I ended up starting therapy immediately. I'd already gone to therapist throughout the years and all of this too, multiple times, but I don't think it was as effective in the time that I was doing it, because I was actively being abused, and every 2 steps forward in therapy, I'd be still taking about 3 steps back. So when I started my relationship with Tristan, I really wanted to be of sound mind and have a really strong grasp on my healing process and be able to be a good partner to him, because face it, my experience with a good partner hasn't really been there for a long time, so I had a lot to learn and a lot to brush up on. To wrap up a few things, as far as the court case goes, the court case ended up ending months later. The owners got sentenced months later. The body broker that brought me down served about 2 years and then some probation. The other folks that were involved with it, most of the other folks that were involved with it, I believe, served some time as well. One of those people who I had mentioned in the podcast episode, who I knew from the area that I came from, was also a part of the court case, but unfortunately he passed away during the court proceedings, which I think also made it kind of hard for them to go forward with it, because he was being tried and then had passed. So the owners ended up both getting multiple years in prison. I believe they're currently in prison to this day for it. When I listened in on the sentencing, and when I had been a part of the sentencing, that was on Zoom, actually. To my understanding, the judge took the victim impact statements and took all of the witnesses testifying seriously, but looked mostly at what the physical evidence as far as documentation looked at, as far as fraud and insurance stuff and everything surrounding money mostly. So they faced some charges under those umbrellas of charges, and yeah, are currently in prison as far as I know. I felt really bad during all of that because I understood that they had families, and I understand that they didn't really seem to know what they were doing as far as having a treatment center. But as I have had time to think about it, I've realized that getting into that kind of work and not knowing what you're doing when people's lives are in your hands and their health is in jeopardy, you should be more abundantly aware of what is going on in the place that you own and the things that are being practiced and the work that needs to be done. Additionally, when I made a victim impact statement, I come to find out later that that was disclosed to people that I didn't disclose it to, and misconstrued to those people. And with the confidentiality of victim impact statements, you are not supposed to share that with the general public. So the only way for those individuals to know about that statement is if the defense side had told them what the contents of my victim impact statement had said, and then they had taken that to their own understanding of what it was and kind of posted a lot of it on social media very publicly. I received a lot of flack for it. Do I regret any of that though? No, because at the end of the day, again, I'm not the one that was running the treatment center, and it should have been ran differently. I have been to rehabs that are ran properly. I have known of rehabs that are ran properly, and that just wasn't one of them. And it ended up costing people their lives. Many of the people that I went to treatment with at all of these locations are deceased to this day. I remember a specific time where I was in a group session at one of the outpatient places I was at, and they told everybody to look around at everybody in the room and account for the fact that at least 20%, if not more, of the people you're looking at will be dead within a year or two. And they were right. I was really lucky to make it out of those situations and to be alive to this day and to be able to talk about it. But that's not the case for everybody. And unfortunately, a lot of people had passed away in the midst of being in the Florida Shuffle. And a lot of people I don't even know, a lot of people I've met, just a ton of people have died as a result of improper care. Another thing that ended up occurring is I did end up leaving the job at the club. After Tristan and I got together at some point, I decided it was in my best interest to not be working there anymore. Kind of got really fed up with the environment of all of it. I'd met some really good people and some good friends that I have to this day in that environment, but as you would imagine, it's not the healthiest environment to be, especially for somebody actively trying to be in a space of recovery. So currently, as of this past year, I am doing harm reduction work again. I work for an organization that is in Northeast Ohio and also does mail order through the entire state of Ohio. We have a whole syringe service program. We help with resources. I specifically do community outreach and drop-in services, as well as helping people to navigate whatever resources to meet their needs would be. I'm very proud of that work that I do, and I'm happy to be able to help prevent death, disease, infection, and other ailments that can happen to folks who are actively using substances. It's super rewarding, and I'm extremely grateful to be able to be doing this kind of work. Additionally, as far as Audie goes, I mentioned him briefly in the beginning, my high school sweetheart. Him and I, through the years, have been able to kindle a friendship. We have come to an understanding of both of us were not in a good place when all those things occurred, and we weren't very good to each other, and there's a lot of forgiveness now there. I am friends with his now wife, And yeah, he's married now, very happy. He's doing phenomenal. His wife is amazing. I love her. Shout out Maria. Yeah, I'm very grateful. Everything did really work out in a really great way. Tris and I got engaged a few months ago. Like I said, he is the best person I've ever met. We have so much in common. He's just a wonderful person. He has a beautiful, beautiful soul. We have a puppy dog together. She's like not a puppy, but we have a dog together. We rent a house together that is not my little rinky-dink apartment now. So we live together. We are planning a wedding, and yeah, I have a ton of support. I have a lot of people that love me, and I am extremely, extremely, extremely grateful for all of that, because I don't know where I'd be without any of that. So for anybody who was wondering about my well-being and if I'm okay and how that ended up, like, it all worked out in the end, and good things ended up coming to fruition in my life, especially because I worked for them and I made a point to try to make my life better than what I was comfortable in previously. So just some final thoughts in conclusion. For starters, I really hope that this is been seen by the right people. I hope somebody's able to learn and resonate with this entire experience that I explained, even if it's not the entire thing, just parts of it. I know that a lot of my experiences, if not all of them, are not very unique. A lot of us have been in abusive relationships. There are a lot of people that have been through the Florida Shuffle. A lot of people have been in care by medical facilities that didn't have your best interests in mind. And also a lot of us have made mistakes that you may hold yourself really, really extra accountable for, and you may really regret. But please grant yourself some grace, because at the end of the day, we can't do anything to change the past. The best we can do is learn from it and grow from it and become better people as a result of it. If you're somebody that is in an abusive relationship or trauma bonded to somebody, please take advantage of the resources and the support that you may have, or seek support for such a thing so you can get out. It is not one of those things that gets better over time. It only gets worse. If you see red flags in any situation, trust their color, trust that they're red, because they do not change colors just because you want them to. Unfortunately, growing pains with making changes in your life about these things are inevitable most of the time. A lot of people are going to experience growing pains. I sure as hell have. And they're very uncomfortable and they don't feel good. But they're worth it in the end. Getting through them, working through them is very important, because at the end of the day, you matter. Your well-being matters, and how you take care of yourself and take care of your well-being is really important. You deserve a happy life. You deserve to be fulfilled, and you deserve to be confident and feel good and healthy and have a good support system on your side. Additionally, for anybody who may have a little bit of a misunderstanding, I do want it to be known that not all rehab facilities are like this. In fact, most of them are not. I was just in the weird series of events where I had been surrounded by a lot of them that were like this. Currently, where I live, I don't really know of very many, if any, facilities that are like this. Don't let this story stop you from receiving help in ways that you might need it, because this does not speak for rehab as a whole. My experience with rehab, with AA, with romantic relationships, with any of that does not speak for it as a whole. So please don't let that hinder you from going after those things and being a part of those things. It's not the same every time. At the end of the day, I'm really lucky that I lived through all these experiences. Not everybody who is with an abusive partner, especially a physically abusive partner, lives through that. Not everybody who goes through an experience with the Florida Shuffle like I did lives through that. Many of the people that I went to treatment with are now deceased and didn't get a chance to ever share about their experiences or talk further on that with anybody. Additionally, not everybody who has experience with drug use survives. That can be avoidable through the power of Narcan. So if you don't get anything out of this, and this is the only thing you get out of it, please carry Narcan. Get it from your local health department, wherever. If you need to contact me, leave a comment or something and I can give you some information on how to get it. But just look out for one another. People's lives do matter, and it's important that we survive and can live to tell our stories and share with other people for the sake of hopefully helping somebody else. Again, thank you for everybody who's been really supportive. I really do appreciate it. I hope this opens up the doors for other people to want to talk about their experiences, even the nitty-gritty parts, because like I said, it might be hard to talk about and you might not be proud, but somebody else might need to hear that and it might really help them in the long run. So thank you again. Appreciate it.